NHS. Well, let's discuss everything that we have learnt today, because with me is Tom Perry. He was abused when he was a schoolboy and now runs a pressure group at Mandate Now, which campaigns for the mandatory reporting of abuse. Tom Perry, thanks so much for being with us. The point to explain of what you want is that anyone who has even a suspicion should be obliged to report it?
Yes, it's reasonable grounds. Reasonable grounds or known abuse, because at the moment in this country, when Mr Savile was doing his worst, and today still, there is no requirement on anyone to report even known rape of a child in a hospital, a school, or any regulated activity. And that very simply fails staff who have to report. That is a very difficult business. And it also fails children. And, despite the many platitudes we've been hearing today, there is going to be no guarantee that there's going to be any improvement until you sort out the foundation of legislation which will help deliver effective child protection. Because
you're talking about needing to reach a situation where no member of staff, even if they're new, they're junior, no member of staff should be too frightened to report something.
Indeed. Well, that is expected now, but now is discretionary to report. And if a member of staff does report, by default, they're a whistleblower. So therefore, and as we know, whistleblowers in the NHS and in other institutional settings don't have a very good lifespan. Now, very simply, we have to support people. It is a very difficult thing to do to report abuse, very challenging. I speak to people who have failed in that function. And they're calling for legislation, and I know that many abusees are so doing, because legislation also introduces a very strong preventative element, because suddenly everybody is sharpened, and those regulated activities are no longer the petri dishes for potential abusers that they are at present. And that's the problem, and this is what the government regrettably just doesn't seem to be able to grasp.
We've heard so much today, and there's so much analysis, but when we hear of, for example, what went on in Broadmoor, other areas of the NHS, and time and again people come out and say, please remember the NHS is a very different beast from what it was then. I mean, you're smiling.
Well, that's the narrative. That's the narrative that they're going to promulgate. I listened to Mr. Hunt, and candidly with you, and do forgive me, Mr. Hunt, it was a comical performance, if it wasn't so tragic, because very simply this cannot be resolved until such time as we have legislation in place. I saw Mr. Gove in February, at his invitation, and through the Education Secretary, and of course it's the Department of Education, for some very strange reason, that's in charge of child protection. They've done a very poor job at it, and it's not getting any better. I saw him in February, and 3 weeks later, when he was questioned by Tom Watson in the House about an abusive incident at the school, which I know quite well, Mr. Gove said that I presented a compelling case for mandatory reporting. Well, that's great. Those are the words. Now let's have the deeds, because the government is repeatedly willing the end, but not providing the means to will the end.
And everything you're calling for, people will listen to you, will absolutely take on board what you say. What about those who say it's not about, and shouldn't be about, regulation? It should be about decent, proper human behaviour. Checks and balances, of course, vetting of people before they're allowed into a school or a hospital, but it's about people doing the right thing.
Oh yes, and let me add another one to that. It's also about duty, It's about duty. Great. Well, duty is meaningless, Duty existed when Mr Savile was abusing throughout his time at Stoke Mandeville and the other settings where he was abusing. So poor is the statutory framework that, was it good and effective, he'd have been operating just in one or two. But instead of that, what we had was Mr Savile abusing in every setting across the country, every regulated activity across the country, at will. So therefore, that tells us something. The system is unfit for purpose, and that's where we are.
Tom Perry, it's very good of you to talk to us. Thanks very much indeed. From the pressure group at Mandate Now. Thank you.